Boa tarde. Boa tarde a todas as persoas que nos estean a ver en directo ou as persoas que vexan este vídeo logo. Agardamos que estedes ben e obrigado por partillar con nós esta segunda tarde de conversas. Meu nome é Antonio Giraldez López, son a metade de Barlebuz, unha editora e un proxecto laso de investigación en torno á arquitectura e as prácticas espaciais. Estamos a presentar Caring Assemblies, Designing for Better Futures, un pequeno programa público online que procura interrogar o design, a arquitectura e as prácticas espaciais como dispositivos de exclusao e especular colectivamente a través destas conversas como construir futuros millores. Caring Assemblies é unha actividade satélite da Porto Design Bienale e estamos moi agradecidos por ter esta oportunidade de partillar con vos estas conversas e este tempo. Este é o segundo día de conversas. Onte tivemos con nos a Ana Pujaner e Paulo Moreira falando das cidades sen cociña e de outros imaginarios urbáns e domésticos que capaz de acoller unha maior diversidade e após Ana Naomi de Sousa, Bernardo Amaral e Siño Baeza da Pina falaron dos procesos de construção e de organização da comunidades de xeito colectivo fronte estas figuras do designer, do arquitecto ou do urbanista como un rol moito máis xerárquico e poñendo en valor esta capacidade de construção ou de arte ou de arquitectura ou de design colectivo. Este segundo día trasladamos as conversas do ámbito urbano ou do ámbito doméstico a outras materialidades, a outros espazos e a outras escalas, dende os procesos de diseño da digitalidade e a escala molecular, onde creemos que tamén son terreos en disputa nos cales é preciso reflexionar e propor futuros millores. A nosa primeira conversa será con Jara Rocha, que falará con Manufactura Independente, e logo ás 6:30 hora portuguesa, 7:30 hora central europea, estarán con nós os artistas Mary Magic e Miriam Simón. Bueno, como comentaba, hoxe comezamos esta primeira sesión entre Jara Rocha e Manufactura Independente, unha conversa que se leva tempo artellando a través de mails e a través de conversas. Jara Rocha investiga, pensa e traballa analizando as urgencias culturais contemporáneas e as formas complexas de distribución do eido tecnolóxico desde unha perspectiva e unha sensibilidade antifa transfeminista. Pola súa banda, Manufactura Independente é un estudo de investigación orientado ao design e á comunicación gráfica formado por Isabel Carvalho e Ricardo Lafuente. Están especialmente interesados nos solapes entre design, cultura libre, software libre e cultura libre experimentan nestes campos a través de ferramentas non convencionais. Jara, Isabel, Ricardo, thanks again for joining us today. We don't want to occupy more time of this conversation describing your work and interests, because we want to hear you directly from your work. So I will quickly disappear, and I'll be back here later to close the conversation. So thanks again for being here, and feel free to start whenever you want.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction, and also for the invitation to Paula and Antonio from Barcelona. It has been such a pleasure to actually be able to reconnect with Ana and Ricardo. I think I don't recall anymore how many years we've been not in touch somehow. So this sounded as an excellent occasion to somehow converse, even like publicly, but to converse and share what we put on the table, and also what we've been engaged with and at during all these years, knowing that that there is somehow like a shared sensibility in some understandings of technology or techno-ecologies, but also of the politics embedded in specific technical practices and devices. So just to say it very quickly before we start, I am especially happy to be able to actually have this moment of exchange and conversation and somehow also update, no, for the three of us.
For sure. Yes, for sure. I mean, for us as well, it's super. First off, very grateful to Bartel Booth for having us in Porto Design for making this possible. I mean, I just feel like repeating what you said, because this is a conversation that we were hoping to happen in not such in a formal way, but I think it's also beautiful that this happens this way.
Yeah, it's great to have a chance to finally interact after this period that seemed quite long, where we felt a bit isolated because of the actual conditions right now. So it's really nice just to be able to stop and have this conversation.
Yeah. So what we just for those who are there, like listening to us synchronously or asynchronously, we decided to start with maybe with a fast walk through possible areas of conversation or discussion in order to share them from the very beginning. And then we will inhabit them differently, depending on where the conversation just sort of, but more like a lot of possible entry points to a conversation. So it's also like maybe a dialogical that could be also fun and surprising for us, just to find questions on the go. So maybe I can start by saying that when thinking about this notion of caring assemblies and of course also designing for better futures, I needed to go back to somehow like a recursive consideration when I think of or when I inhabit notions of technology or of technique or of infrastructure or of protocol. I tend to start by recalling myself that it is very explicitly a matter of how the conditions of possibility are set or not, how the conditions of possibility for a particular world are organized and are assembled, also are clutched, no, or articulated. When I say conditions of possibility, I'm speaking about both material conditions, but also semiotic conditions. So I like to say semiotic material conditions of possibility, just to signal at this fact that there is a much richer and thicker entry point to the discussion and conversation around techniques and technologies and infrastructures and protocols if we don't declutch the material arrangements that we know that technology very much participates on or actually is part of or accomplice of. But it is also a semiotic matter around which specific sensibilities are organized, no, and specific ways of circulating understandings of those worlds and worldings. So, and then there is also this notion of possibility, which I think it's pretty much in the very framework of the invitation for today's discussion, no, like what is possible and what might be possible, and how can we provide ourselves with hopefully like a widening of the possible, of what's possible, no? And it's for me, and also in conversation with a very dear friend common friend of us, Femke Snelting, it is very useful to actually put in tension this notion of the possible with the notion of the probable, because when we look around and we see our immediate surroundings and how those conditions of how the world is set technically are established, we basically keep finding the probable very much, and like a very fierce settlement of the probable, no? And so a possible zone of discussion or an entry point, and this is the first one that I launch here, have to do with these very probable surroundings, these very probable articulations of the conditions that actually also make us be and behave and also interact. And the problem might actually have to do with the legacy, like the long tail of the modern project, no, of modernity, with its very particular subjects or subjectivities, with its very particular morality also, but also with its very particular devices that have been like persistently organizing and naming and taxonomizing and ordering and measuring the world, no? So when we start considering the conditions of possibility, if we look at why it's more conditions of probability, I think it is important to look at the legacies of what we also have in our tables today, no? So this is one place. Of course, when I speak of the very probable conditions and the modern legacies, it also has to do with the fact that the technopolitics that arrange our shared living nowadays are pretty much organized around colonial and patriarchal coordinates, no? And so this would be another area of discussion if you wish. I am just like naming them as possible zones. So what are these coordinates? These colonial or coordinates of technocolonialism, what we could name technocolonialism. Of course, we can think of like a number of forms of exclusion, of extraction, or of exploitation, or of exhaustion, basically, no, of so-called resources. So this is one place. But of course, if we speak about colonial and patriarchal regimes, we need to also speak about like how they get established, how they continue to be established, no? Like what makes them reproduce on a daily basis, no? On a very also mundane basis. And this is something, and this is like somehow like a catalyst concept that they call totalitarian innovation. I like how Donna Haraway speaks about informatics of domination. To speak about this, the setting of informatic systems for the sake of domination of bodies, domination of population, but also domination of space. No, in this particular conversation, perhaps that is of use. So, but I think totalitarian innovation also brings this notion of the new. Like the ever new advancements that is so also essential in the modern apparatus, no? If you want, like the developmentist, no, this progress, like ever always advancing, no, in a fictional line of time, no. So this is an area of discussion that I would love to invite you to join through particular practices also, no? Because I'm aware that all these notions that I am launching here then get grounded differently depending on the situated needs and communities and also forms of domination or of control that need to be challenged, contested, or resisted, or maybe just disattended. So it's this is another area of possible conversation. And just to not be like so contestatory or antagonistic, which of course sometimes is useful and it's necessary, I would like to also offer like a possible entry point or a couple of them that are more like affirmative, no? Just possible zones to inhabit in a more inventive, even celebrative way, no? And one that for me is like very fascinating nowadays, also in conversation with many others, is this notion of digital discomfort. And when I say this discomfort, it is actually very connected to the notion of the probable. I think the probable and comfortable connections and comfortable relationality are quite the same. No, like I mean, we see the values of effectiveness, functionality, problem solving. No, like these are values that are somehow naturalized, no, that have crystallized in the devices or the techniques so strongly that it takes some time to just zoom out and understand that they don't need to be there. We don't need to look for efficiency every time, or for seamlessness, or for basically comfort in all our relations. Sometimes some roughness, some friction might help to actually provide ourselves with oblique understandings or surprise ontologies, even. No, so when I think or converse about discomfort or digital discomfort or computational discomfort, I say it affirmatively. No, also like what if digital discomfort could provide us with somehow different ways to actually share vulnerabilities or share or embrace complexity, basically. And this is the other one that I wanted to launch also. The potential of staying with complexity, or actually looking for more complexity, no, thickening the complexity instead of running away from it. Of course, we are confronted nowadays with a very deliberated or designed confusion, no. And I'm not speaking about that sort of complexity. I'm speaking about the juxtaposing of layers that are socioeconomical, that are technical, that make different forms of power cohabit between them, that also make like different legacies or histories or how do you say, like memories, also collective memories, no, cohabit. So this is the kind of complexity that I would like to propose as in an affirmative way. And it is related, just like this is the last one before I pass the word to you. It is related to the distribution of agencies a distribution of agency that is that is a little bit different to the very probable anthropocentric one, androcentric one, Eurocentric one. No? So what if the distribution of agency, when we speak about complex relationalities, in order to widen the possible, involved some inventiveness, or also some crooked attention, some oblique attention. So yeah, this is perhaps like where I can pass it to you. I think it's very inspiring to see how the distribution of the technological or of the technical can actually indeed happen differently. And I think people like you, from your praxis, you are making it evident, no? Like the distribution of agency can happen differently. There can be other ways of engaging with the semiotic and material conditions of the everyday, no, of the very mundane. Yeah, these are maybe the possible entry points, and I'm sure you have many others. So I'm looking forward to to listen to them.
Okay, thank you. This is huge. We're just making so many notes here, in addition to the ones we already had, because it's, even though we are not so immersed on the more theory exploration of the phenomena as you are in an amazing way, everything rings true with the kind of practice and problematics that we are pretty much living nowadays. I'm not sure if that's where we can start, but we've found it very visible, all the issues that you had with our experience with teaching online, teaching at a distance in university. Because, well, it involves, of course, the pandemic and how to deal with that. And one of the striking things was, in the beginning, you really had this, not just in teaching, but you had this feeling that this event is going to change a lot. That resonated, this idea of the possible as opposition to the probable, because for a moment we kind of forgot that what was obviously going to happen was a colonization of this new space that was created. I mean, of course, education is directed towards the market. That's a tired one, but here it was true that there was a point of hope that our relationship with technology would become something more meaningful, more problematic, more uncomfortable, in that beautiful sense that you gave us, in that it would challenge us. Of course, that's kind of not what happened, right? Not only do we make do, well, of course, you have a teaching class which is pretty much already has been under pressure, so there is no point in kind of pointing fingers, but rather in looking at the landscape. And what we see is, for instance, tools for teaching and tools for either remote or just managing teaching. You know, Moodle is one of those things, and it kind of has this configuration that brings me back to the whole patriarchal and colonial thing, which is it is an impositive and imperative tool, in the sense that it gives you the workflow, and it tells you are going to grade students this way, and you are marking it this way, and you have to give them a due date. You cannot send an assignment without a due date, and by default, Moodle will cut off any student if they submit after the deadline. And this is the crystallization in technology of very, very austere teaching practices that many teachers will probably not even relate to, but they will inevitably start doing things that way if the tool that they use comes with those features. At the same time, again, with the probable outcome of events, here in Portugal, you have Microsoft and Google signing partnerships with government to provide software, teaching software for free and licenses for free, and it's I kind of hesitate to make the analogy, but it's true that this is very close to the drug dealer thing of you get the first dose for free, but then come back and you'll come back when you're hooked. And this is exactly that. I mean, you're preparing students to use specific tools that will work a certain way and drive them a certain way. And civilizationally, that's just extremely sad. That the teaching, contemporary teaching, could find so much more of the possible, but the probability is that once again it will lose the opportunity to look at itself. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
You could make the Foucault connection too, right?
Yes, definitely. I mean, one of the things that we've also been looking at is this idea that technology imposes systems of compliance, and you are a piece inside of a much bigger system, and you need to perform a certain number of actions to be able to proceed to the next stage, or so that someone else can proceed to the next stage. And this idea of a chain of workflows and actions by the user is really very, very directed for compliance, to make people follow certain logics. And in that, we also see a connection with the studies of Foucault and this comparison that he makes of architecture and these structures that are created to organize space and people in a certain way. Like, he makes the comparison between the structural organization of prisons and schools and how they are connected, and this idea that by configuring the space in a certain way, you can make people perform or act in a certain way. And of course, here it's not a physical space; it's the digital space, but things proceed in a very similar way. And we see the systems for teaching. They are very similar to systems that you have for companies, for employees to sign in the morning, sign off at the end of the day. And there's this urge to make the system kind of a surveillance system so that you can manage your employees efficiently. And it's really weird that we see that teaching is kind of going that way, and schools are being more oriented to work like companies. But this is kind of crystallizes that idea in a very practical way, and very something that you really feel that is present, and that you are just being part of that bigger system. And of course, this situation is great so that you have not much time to figure out ways to escape it.
Yeah. Can I say something in relation to this?
Yes.
I think you're absolutely pointing at a key element, and I think it's of course it's happening in many different realms, and we basically see like an increment of this phenomenon during COVID-19. It's not also new of the pandemic. It's just like an accentuation of it. But I have been also conversing with Martino Morandi and some others about the particularities of this process in the pedagogical realm, because it's very telling how, for example, this, there are many points, but one is the figure of the user as an emergent subjectivity. The student becomes a user, and this becomes like an inseparable. It becomes like a strict continuum of participation, or of basically like going ahead with a praxis that can be or should be much wider, which is basically learning, no? So if it is about providing with learning situations, it's very telling how how narrow the figuration of the user, how narrow space the figuration of the user leaves for a student. No, that I mean, and we say student without entering like disciplinary differences or age differences or context differences. No, it's just like saying student user, almost like with a hyphen. It's so painful, but at the same time, it's very telling of how these platforms, just to not say tools only, because they are really like platforms or even platforms. This is another new term, just to be able to name platforms of platforms. No, like these places where many platforms are embedded and provide with a apparently seamless experience of study or of learning. As you said, those platforms give you the workflow. And this is already also something quite worrying. No, they give the study flow, no? or the learning flow. And where I want to arrive with this is that it's been so fast that we found ourselves looking for mutual support networks or alternatives to these like super predator platforms like Zoom, for example, just to name like the paradigmatic one. But you can say Teams or whatever. But apart from the fact that they are privative and that they have their particular like business agenda and that they belong to that world that we know, it's also quite of a gaslighting experience, because it's not Zoom or I don't know, like the open source alternative like Jitsi or Big Blue Button or no. I mean, of course, these like choosing, like the picking of a different or a so-called alternative platform will make it a problematic explicit, like the problematic of the privatization of connectivity, no, and the tracking of data, no, unwillingly, and the extraction of experience of connectivity, But actually, the paradigm is actually the same. I mean, it's like a Big Blue Button or Jitsi or like all these somehow like belong to the same paradigm of streaming audiovisuals in multidirectionality with this frontality, like this arrangement of the learning situation or space around a video call with very little space for experimentation or for inventiveness or even for away from keyboard situations. Like they really come with a whole paradigm in themselves. So, and also they come with a very, very dangerous assumption of doing it just because we can. And this just because we can is actually, for me, an indicator of what we it is, or a coordinator, of the coordinate system of patriarchocolonial technological apparatus, that we were mentioning before. Just because we can, not just because I can, like the emergent subjectivity that says I do it just because I can is so damaging. Well, another conversation would be like the environmental implications of the implementation, like the massive implementation of this paradigm along schools and universities and all sorts of pedagogical. Yeah, and well, I had something to say also about the chains of workflows, but I will keep it for later.
No, it's I mean, completely agree. That's it's worth going further than the critique around privatization and current socioeconomic configuration of society around neoliberal logic, which is there, but it's refreshing to hear you go beyond that, and we want to follow you there. No, I really like this the reference of the student as a user, because from our experience in the beginning of the pandemic, one of the feelings that you had was powerlessness. Like, what do we do now? We don't know what's coming tomorrow. And all of a sudden, so my note here was the teacher also became a user, because teachers were waiting, okay, so what's the tool that we should use? How should we use it? And then the school board comes in and says, this is the tool that you should use. But at the same time, they say that because that's what they hear that other schools are doing, because there were no directions from the ministry. So in the end, you have the student as a user, the teacher as a user, the school board as also a user. Even the Ministry of Education becomes a bit of a user in terms of completely losing agency in face of a system where they have no choice. They only have one button. And that's, running further with the user analogy. There is clearly this idea that we became the bottom end of a hierarchy that kind of goes much more and goes beyond, again, capitalist exploitation, but really the configuration of power structures that for historical reasons ended up this way. And the pretense of agency, like where a teacher pretends that they are in control in this really weird medium where every student is kind of, their connection is breaking, their dog is barking, they have to leave because they're ringing at the door, and everything is completely out of control. And we're still trying to pretend it's not. And this was very, very, very strong. There was once we had an opportunity, thanks to another work, to witness a class of high school students. So we usually teach in university, but in high school, I remember seeing the beginning of a class, and the teacher was asking all students to show themselves. And this was such a strongly charged act, because all of a sudden, it's this idea of expecting, of course, if the students are there in the classroom and they're all showing themselves, why don't they do this here? Well, maybe they're not dressed. Maybe they're having an argument because everyone's stressed out at home. Maybe their connection is crap. So the only ones that show are the ones that usually have the means to go about life in a calm way, like their parents are not super stressed with their economic conditions, they have a good connection, they had time to make themselves presentable. And backgrounds, exactly, who's going back. I mean, do they have a dedicated room that they can decorate, or will you see the parents doing telework? And one of the saddest things, I once had a student who couldn't follow classes because his parents were teachers who were teaching at the same time, and they ate all the bandwidth. So just being there on a Zoom class or a JITSI class, it's the same problem, even if it's free software. Just the act of demanding the pretense of presence from the students kind of breaks down so much of this structure that we are trying to keep everyone in the same boat. And this has been a thing, like this kind of elephant in the room that everyone suddenly is expected to have a good and functional internet connection, a room in their place. And again, going beyond the unfair situation that this leaves families and people who don't have the means, it's just the very strange silent acceptance of these workflows as it's the way it's going to be. And you see a lot of, we discuss a lot the articles and papers coming from an area like education sciences, where terms like blended learning, e-learning, stuff are developed and talking about the potentiality of that. But usually they completely leave out these details, like the practical details, like how do you have internet connection for everyone? What tool are you using? What company are you depending on? What is the ministry proposing? Are we giving them computers? What are they using?
Yeah, I think it even, I would say it goes beyond that in the sense that they present this new way of learning as a commodity, because you can be in the place that you choose to be. Maybe you can also choose the time, and it's really a convenience that everything now is catered to your agenda, personal agenda. I don't know, and while at the same time, in a way, you're kind of trying to replicate what happened in the physical classroom, and there's this two realities that are trying to overlap, but they are this really weird. They create this really weird space of it's everything the same, but it's just in the computer, but it's much better for you. And you were going to say?
No, I
Yeah,
was nodding.
and it's just weird, and it's and reading these articles kind of makes you think that these people are studying the subject, but they're not actually actors that are taking part of this experiment to have a better understanding of how things happen in reality, how they materialize, and all these issues.
Yeah, actually, so just to continue a little bit, our analysis with Martino was that there has been also a part, like what can be called a delegation of labor, like or at least like a displacement of pedagogical labor to IT departments. Now that you mentioned the ministry, for example, I mean, it's also happening in private education. But so these big institutional structures, what are nesting is actually like a very worrying. I'm not saying that the IT department should not actually participate in the pedagogical praxis. I think this could actually host like lots of potential to not separate anymore, like the very like infrastructural articulation or organization of a learning situation with the content that is circulated in the classroom, for example, no, but just to understand that the very structure, the very infrastructure is contributing to the content itself, and they are mutually effective. But what I'm saying is that this is happening unnoticed and just business as usual. So the IT departments have seen themselves overwhelmed because of, like, from one day to another they had to make lots of classrooms function smoothly under the paradigm of hyperconnectivity and streaming, audiovisual streaming, circulation from all sorts of connective conditions, as you said, no, like from very precarious, like combining very precarious ones with hyper controlling institutions, or with also one important thing is that usually these platforms don't belong or were not designed under the pedagogical realm, but were designed for basically like business meetings, and were imported into the pedagogical realm. So I think this is a matter of caring assemblies, and I think this has a lot to do. So this displacement of labor comes with a big lack of care for the workers of many sorts, for of course the student users and the narrow cells that they are placed in. So again, as we were saying at the beginning, it's a matter of distribution of agency and how agency is distributed, like the like pedagogical agency, if you want, but also infrastructural agency. No, so who holds like the ability, or if you want, the responsibility to participate or to contribute to a transformation in this situation. This would be an open question, and also just to say, I mean, these platforms are not hosting like huge damages also in their very making. So there is also, I think, a lot to learn from feminist economics and the analysis of the global change of care. So this distribution of care work that is displaced around the globe in a planetary chain of delegation of care responsibilities. No, basically the key example is the migrated often woman that travels somewhere to take care of the children of some Western family, leaving their children somewhere else, being taken care by someone else. So these chains of care are actually also happening in the very functioning of these platform capitalists, platform capitalism, like the devices of them. Like, for example, care comes in the form of tagging or of keeping the seamlessness, the seamless experience. No, care comes in the form of training the algorithms for computer vision to basically provide so-called user students with the visual experience in the classroom. So those are also care practices that somehow are, at the moment, I feel like staying out of the conversation. So I would like to bring this like transfeminist sensibility, like transfeminist technosciences sensibility to this conversation on pedagogical, the pedagogical industrial complex.
That's great.
Basically.
No, that's a great hook, and that's a great term, because it's very, and I was talking about Foucault, and like you said, that the pedagogical industrial complex, that reminds me of military industrial complex, and it's not by accident that you're
Prison,
using the same terms, because they are configured the same way, hierarchically and statically and so on. But yeah, I think you're giving us, I assume that we're giving us cues there, and I'm happy to take that. This probably is a nice moment to go into, okay, let's look at carrying assemblies and ways out, or ways more into the problem. Like getting more into the problem sometimes can be useful, rather than just getting out and eliminating it.
Embrace complexity.
Yes, there you go. No, so maybe we can. So yes, we've been articulating the difficulties that we found, and maybe just spend a little more talking about, okay, so what did we do to respond to that? Which we so we brought this to the conversation. So we set up a feminist server, a computer server, and by feminist server I mean there is the Feminist Server Manifesto, which was also. I don't want to put it wrongly, but Femke Snelting was also involved in this, I think. But just not the only one, so I just won't get into more names. But this idea of operating a server under feminist principles, where you consider equality, non-discrimination, non-violence. And what you end up with, because then you realize how much technology, once you start looking, and not just because you talk about master and slave, technology really embodies a lot of, again, patriarchocolonial. So we set out to set up this little thing. You might recognize this little computer is a Raspberry Pi. And this contains a lot of knowledge and history, because this is kind of the witness and contains everything of our teaching experience. So we started actually before the pandemic. We set it up because we were teaching web development, web design classes and code classes for students, and we wanted them to have a place to host, an easy place to host things. And usually, you know that university departments might or might not be super open to that. And nowadays, not so much. We had this privilege, like we had this 10 megabyte space in our university's computer. That's not a thing anymore. So we just got this one. We hooked it up in our office and started doing things. Actually, with we didn't tell much to the school about this, actually. We just went ahead because usually you get around easier when you're doing things you're quietly instead of just
and
about it.
it also meant going through a lot of bureaucratic processes because school networks, they have a lot of rules and restrictions that there are things that you allow students to do and things that you don't allow them to do. And when you are teaching web technologies, you kind of need a way to go around those restrictions. Of course, that might mean the students might be in class seeing some website that the school administration decided they shouldn't, but you need to allow that to be able to fully explore the technologies and what you can do with them, and just accept that that might bring other things ahead, but that's how it works. And so this gave us a bit of room to explore in the middle of a network that had already a lot of restrictions.
Yeah, well, they couldn't connect to this from the school. That was one thing, and we spent like 1 month working with the IT department for that to happen. And in the end, I don't think that was fixed because the IT person had to leave, and then we had to wait for another. So in the end, we just told students, hey, just do things here and do send your stuff at home, which is kind of a reversal of what you usually have. Usually, it can only work at school, and we had a situation.
Yeah.
Anyway, so and the thing we did is, so we installed free software and operating systems. That's something that we as designers started doing as a way to work outside the Adobe logic because of us being burned by that 12 years ago. And it became more and more part of our own practice. And in this case, we just used it. We installed a free operating system, Debian Linux, web server, Apache, and we have a teaching tool and a hosting place for the students' work. And this was a bit remarkable in the sense that usually the alternative is the cloud. You set up Google Space or Google Drive or Microsoft, whatever. And what happens is you don't see it, you don't touch it. You have a control panel, a web panel that you also don't know where it is. And the thing with having a physical computer that we get an email because there's a power cut in our office building and it knocked the server out and we need to run here to reconnect it. And just that act of how to deal with failure, usually when you do it in the cloud, you write to support, but here we're on our own, so we have to come back here and reconnect the whole thing. And that felt very empowering, the whole agency aspect of being able to set up your own infrastructure and work with students on that. And as a web, it's obviously an excellent entry point to explain web structure to students. Like, you're not connected to Amazon, you're connected to a building over there. You can see it from here, and I can show you how that works. At the same time, the network restrictions in the school are a great introduction to network politics that then you can go in and reach them. After that, so when the pandemic struck and we found, okay, we have to come up with our own way because everyone's just doing it on Zoom, and it became really clear to us, Zoom is a terrible thing because we cannot give synchronous classes to 30 students and expect everything to work. I mean, those are the kind of issues that we run into our jobs. Everyone kind of figured this out at some point. Right? So we set out, okay, so how can we set up something that keeps this idea of feminist server, respecting people because students are adults. That's something that's also falling out of fashion in university. The fact that students are adults, that they need to be carried, they need to be given responsibility. So that's to deal with this synchronicity. We set up a Rocket Chat instance, which is something like Slack or just text chat that has a history. And this is where we get to carrying assemblies, because this we've realized that creating spaces is an amazing possibility of contemporary times, because the critique that we hear a lot is that we lost the internet to turbocapitalist interests and the industrial pedagogical industrial complex, but I really don't agree with this, because I don't think we lost the internet. It's just overshadowed by this layer of Facebook and Google and that. But you can still set up your web server, your chat room. They're still there. They're just
absolutely
not the only thing. And this brought up, so we got really excited because then we started seeing the results. We call this the chat environment, where we sent both school assignments and we talked to students like in private chats, mentoring them, and they could send their assignments through the chat itself because they're web. And that worked practically, but also brought up really unexpected things. Like students were talking and discussing really there and bantering with each other in a way that we were surprised that they were doing in front of us. Also, maybe it helped that we called it the playground, based on this usual saying here in your teens when you're a student, like I learn more in the playground than in the classroom. And this was always a very good lead, in the sense that we are not just here to direct them to work. I mean, they're alone in their places. We are alone in our place, and we need to connect. Doing it by text is very, very comfortable and very. I think it removes a lot of the tension that, for instance, with video calls with your teacher, you use text, and we started expanding. We made some different channels. We made a channel for COVID talk because everyone wanted to talk about this, and we already had an experience in another community. Let's make a separate breakout room so that this does not infect the main conversation. And we found other pretty things. So we started using emoji for votes. This was also a fun experience. And we found this along with the students. They were really happy that they didn't have to follow things synchronously. They could read what happened before. And
they also had a way to interact with each other without our presence, which is also something that I don't think you get when you're using like Zoom or something like that, because you are in a classroom and you are supposed to talk when you are assigned to talk, but not exactly exchange privately. And in the school you can do that. You can talk to the person who's sitting by your side.
Next to you. Yeah.
Here in the computer, you kind of need to find ways to allow for that, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so this was this kind of strange, unexpected moment of assembly when we found this. We had created a space that was supposed to fulfill a very, very practical purpose, and actually a dry purpose, like just conducting a pedagogical process. But it became so much more when students were venting over text stuff about what they were living. At the same time, we could carry it with us with a mobile app to just sometimes go there and get this kind of company. So it became yet another kind of high-level space instead of just being the school tool like Moodle or Zoom. Just by considering the context. So one of the premises was like no synchronous mandatory things. So we had one-on-one meeting with students, but there was not a requirement if you didn't have a good connection. We could do it by text. And this was powerful, and we put out videos explaining things. That was also a revelation on how things can work, because then people can do it on their own terms. They don't have to keep following if the connection breaks. I mean, I heard reports of students that they kind of arranged between themselves to record a class together. Because every once in a while, when someone would lose their connection, and they would lose that part of the class, so they kind of group sourced a hack around this limitation, which is super sad, because it just shows that there's a big hole in the system. But, yeah, but my point here is really that we can definitely have a lot of possibility as opposed to probability to expand how to assemble, right? How to get together, because that's a big issue. Like setting community is such an overused term right now, right? You hear it everywhere. Like every product has a sales pitch about joining the community. And that's sad. The term community is very, very worth exploring, and its less rosy sides, either first, the issue of moderation. This is something that comes up, and it's not a technical issue. It has been treated like a technical issue by Google, Facebook, and Twitter, who said that their algorithms are going to just delete all hate speech. We know how that goes. And I was reading a paper about the Fediverse and Mastodon the other day by Émeric Mansou and Oscar Abing, which is an extremely well-written report on the techno-political configurations of a new way of communicating and setting up connections between networks that go beyond the big platform. And one of the things is that they remark about is that the Mastodon community understood privacy not as a technical challenge, but as a social challenge. It's not something that you can put into the system. You need to give people the tools to moderate, to tune what kind of behavior and what kind of connections to other servers you will allow. And I found it striking, and this is one of the subjects that we've been also talking a lot, this idea of moderating something of, I heard this other term the other day, conversation gardening, which is keeping a space in a way that things can grow. And that's a very challenging notion, but it's still the one that gives me the most hope that we can drop this meme that we are losing the internet and losing our agency in the internet. I mean, I think we never had so much power in terms of creating things, creating solutions, experimenting with others, real-time communication, collaborative editing. I mean, come on, we didn't have that on the old internet, and it's there, and I think it's worth.
Yeah.
And
this is a very exquisite example of how fugitivity actually has a fugitivity has a potential in the pedagogical realms that are like highly mediated, let's say, but they can be highly mediated under like very different forms of governance, no, that are like situated for the occasion. I agree with you with about the overuse of the creating community affirmation, just as if communities could be created, no? I mean, I think, and this is very related to the framework of caring assemblies, basically. No, I mean, it could be more humble, perhaps, to speak about the facilitation for the emergence of a community, no? But and in that facilitation, there are many decisions to be taken, and the way those decisions are taken depends, of course, on the scale. Is very different, like a group of 20 people than just like a Ministry of Education, as you mentioned before. But all these landscapes. Just to stay close to the space practices that they invited us to speak about. But all these landscapes really speak a lot about this potential of dissidence, of fugitivity, in order to widen the possible. And for me, like if I speak from my particular practice, I mean, whether if it's in the writing of fiction, or in the writing of academic texts, or in the writing of bug reports, or in the testing of some visual material, or in the pedagogical practice, or in, I don't know, curatorial practice, or whatever. I always tend to call that practice a practice of mediation somehow. But I am especially interested in the notion of remediation because of the double sense. I mean, of course, because it has a lot to do with these chains and these circuits and this circulation along what can look as an industrial continuum, but also has some some cracks for potential, and also not. We don't only circulate in the nodes of this continuum, but also there are like some paranodal spaces to inhabit, as the one that you just described. But so this circulation along different media, according to the political urgency or the needs or the desires, no, or what basically drives a group or a community to come or to be, is one of the meanings. But the other has a lot to do with repair. No, remediation has a lot to do with partial reparation. And this is pretty much what I heard in what you shared. That has a lot to do with partial reparation. No, of course, it's not abolishing the cloud paradigm, but it is partially repairing the damages of such cloud paradigm for a particular group of people in a particular situation. And this is the kind of affirmative politics that I mean, I am so happy to hear about your feminist server. One of, I mean, my favorite line of the feminist server manifesto is the last line, in which it says, a feminist server strongly tries to not apologize for not being always available. So this is contributing to the abolition of the cloud also, because of the assumption of having everything available at hand just because you can anytime. No, like the kind of what kind of emergent community can emerge with such a resourceful access to everything. I mean, it's such an evident repetition of active colonial patriarchal modernity. But yeah, I wanted to just comment on your experience under this notion of remediation and partial reparation, and maybe in relation to damage, or the cloud paradigm damage, or the platform capitalism damages, or all the damages resulting from the speedy turbo implementation of these paradigms. With some friends, we've been considering about a methodology for partial reparation, no? And we call this methodology or sort of methodology querying damage, and it's basically about spending time with questions that have to do with who is involved, like just to take some time to see who is involved, not only like, again, to come back to the figuration of the figuration of the student user or the user teacher, but also just to see other, like, who's working also for this to actually happen like that, no? Who's working for you and who is serving whom. But also questions about the wheres and the whens, no, the temporalities, the spatialities, the planetary distribution, the assumption that just because you can activate like a whole planetary network in order to circulate a particular file. Like all those questions somehow like get combined and mixed in fictional formulas that we like to write, just to see like how these damages can be written and can be explicited without leaving elements apart just because it's too complex, no? So it's I mean, I would love to. I can share the link later. It's also on the shared screen. It's called Querying Damage. Yeah, Yeah. Well, actually, we haven't shared. Sorry, we haven't shared this the screen before. But maybe we can leave it there for a while, so people can look at it. It's all. If you go to this URL, all elements are clickable, so you can go and spend time in the different projects. You just need to type the URL and look for example, the catalog of formats for digital discomfort and other ways to resist totalitarian zombification, or the queer damage that I just referred to. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were speaking about this project that in this server that we set up, there was also this notion of caring for the body, in the sense that when you have to follow classes at distance, you are required to spend a lot of time in front of the computer or sitting, and you forget, and it seems like the systems and the technology forgets that we are people and that we need to move, and that we get really tired. Like, our energies are very different when we are in a physical classroom and when we are in a virtual classroom, and just don't caring for that. Like, in our classes, we establish this limit of how much time we need to be there together, because it's really cruel in a way, and it's bad for the students if you ask them to stay there for 4 hours, because the physical class goes on for 4 hours, and we know that in the physical class we can go out at any point just for a break, and that we have regular breaks and we are not interacting the whole time. And this notion of care, I think it's also connected to the feminist server, and this idea of caring not only for the digital infrastructure, but caring for ourselves, like our physical persons. And you are
Yeah.
right. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, please go ahead.
No, and to end, just, you are completely right in saying that, of course, one solution doesn't fit everyone, and what you can do with a small group of people is not something that you can do with a large group of people. It's just, this being able to explore, having the autonomy, and just a bit more space to try and spend time with these questions.
Can I add something? Because you were talking about this idea of by default, people are supposed to spend lots of time in front of the computer, and I couldn't help but remember, like 2 decades ago when I was a teenager, and the big thing was video games. They make kids stick to their screen, and they will stay there until the parents will drag them. And there was a very interesting development when Nintendo, I think, with the handheld consoles and the Wii, they started doing prompts saying, "Hey, you've been playing for an hour. Why don't you go outside?" And there is a window like with wind, and it struck me that maybe like Slack or Zoom should do that too. Why don't they? Because they and Google and Microsoft, and they have all these kind of algorithms and biometrics to figure out how tired we are. But why are they never caring for who is on the other side of the screen? And I find striking that it's the video games that had this amazing, addictive, terrible potential that were the ones that are still kind of keeping it real in terms of caring. Like, I know, as in they do well. Parental controls, for instance, are a good example. I was reading about how sensible they are with like trying to limit the kids' work. But we're also now in the world where the parents themselves are addicted to video games and devices, so we stopped talking about that. And this was something that struck me. I think there's so many loose threads here. I could just keep talking about.
Yeah, but I think it's before we have to go. I think it would be excellent now that we are entering the the conversation about like different understandings of care, and as it this biennale is very related to material practices, no? Somehow like the material cultures of these quantified presences. No, we can say. I think it's excellent. It's an excellent moment to also look at how care is being understood in a massive transversal way. Like in under the pandemic, let's say, as a matter of distance, of social distance. I mean, I have been studying with Femke for like the last 5 years, volumetrics and all the politics embedded in technologies that produce volume basically by measuring. So we understood that volume is not pre-existent, but it's something that emerges after you start measuring the world with these particular sensing practices, no? Like, so you can measure depth and you can measure density and you can you can measure that. So, but you can measure distance also between entities socially read as individuals, no? And the distance between these entities socially read as individuals also comes with a lot of assumptions of what is needed, what is important, what is care, and what is going to actually provide with some remediation or some repair, no, in the relationality. And this is so intervened by high-tech technologies, or sort of high-tech and solutionist paradigms like apps. I mean, I know. I just want you to show, if possible, the screen that it's just a joke, but I love this meme and how it circulated under the title "The Day Pythagoras Died." It's like 1 meter, the 1.5 meter society, and the topologies that emerge out of this systematization of complex relationalities, and the 1.5 meter society. I mean, if it's about that, it's about the flattening, like the extreme flattening of relationalities, and the assumptions that it's as easy as quantifying positionalities, and as easy as tracking and tracing and controlling positions through the assumption of yet another figuration or subjectivity, which is the user of a smartphone. So not in this case, not the user of a platform, but of a concrete device. I mean, it's a super clumsy way of introducing it, but I would love to hear during the last minutes a little bit about your very sharp study on contact tracing apps, if possible.
Okay, wow, that's okay. So just for context, we've been working as at the board of Portuguese digital rights organizations for a year now, more than a year. We've been closely following the thing with contact tracing apps. There's a lot to say, so I will say very little about this. But they are striking in the sense that they impose this notion of. My note here was making us clunky cyborgs, in the sense that we are carrying a technology that's supposed to watch over us and save us, but by its own configuration, like Bluetooth really doesn't work to measure distances. This is just a narrative, an optimistic narrative that please, our phones will save us. They can measure distance.
A political fiction. Yeah.
And then if you study the protocol, Bluetooth really doesn't work for that. It doesn't work in buses and trains, and gives you false negatives, and everyone kind of figure it out quickly. It was really not working that well. And that process is fraught with so many really interesting aspects, like you mentioned solutionism, but this kind of blind faith in technology, like most of the government communication was like, if we believe it enough, it will work. So no one ever said that it didn't work 100%. And this idea of amplifying us with technology, the kind of cyborg agenda, which is super interesting. Like, we amplify ourselves not just with regular tools like McLuhan, but like McLuhan was talking about, but we are amplifying ourselves by networking ourselves with devices. But we're doing that with devices and ways of measuring that don't work. Or work very, very poorly, and are presented with a cover of efficiency and national mission to make things, and that's why we get to clunky cyborgs, because in the end you don't have anything. It's like a Baudrillard kind of thing, you know. You create this very strange image, but by overlaying it with the actual situation, you screw up both. You screw up the image, it's destroyed. The map is destroyed because it overlays the territory, and the territory is destroyed because it's covered by the map. So in the end, you destroy the narrative, and you destroy the intention to actually create these tools and use technology to solve something and improve something. So contact tracing is a beautiful example, beautiful in the worst sense, of a complete failure of this kind of narrative. And that's a precious case, because you don't usually have such strong evidence of the big problems when we extend technology into the biotechnological political realm without very strong consideration.
Yeah.
To end, one of the catchphrases that we had to explain this is like, these apps and these technological devices are being treated as vitamins, something that you can take, and well, if that doesn't work, it doesn't work, but well, instead of vaccines, which need very careful contemplation, political, technical, social, to actually even consider. And yeah, of course, this really overlaps a lot with the issues that we talk. Agencies, what could technology be if it respected the people that are carrying it, and so on. Again, I think this could turn a new chapter into the conversation, but I think that chapter it definitely has to come out, and we have to discuss this, how that will happen, because this start to something, but we have to.
We could totally have a whole new conversation about this. We will maybe find a context for it. Thanks for sharing, like, the outline of it. I think it's so super excellent how you finished basically pointing at what I also found in Sylvia Winter's writing. It's impossible to only understand humanness from the bio category, and she actually proposes to do it from the bio mythos, no, like combining the fictions and the narratives with the bio, and they are like inextricably linked. So the myth of contact tracing apps as devices of care or apparatuses of care, I think it's an excellent way of finishing this exchange for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the conversation. I would spend like two more hours listening to you, and I think that this is another new chapter, and it would be really interesting. But we have to close here because we have a conversation. But first of all, thank you again for this fruitful conversation. I learned a lot, and I think that you have put in value a lot of topics, trying to figure how to deal with this notion of digital discomfort, or this notion of availability, or in that kind of affirmative way, how to imagine new possibilities, how to go beyond these rigid structures and these big platforms, and how to inhabit, in a more comfortable way, the internet and the digital. I think this these ideas, in some sense, connect with some of the ideas that will later be exposed by Mary Magic and Miriam Simon. So I guess we can stop here and continue with the discussions around design issues in our next conversation. For the public, vou voltar ao galego, o marco portugués para despedir a sessão, emplazar ao público, aos assistentes, a que escoiten as nosas seguintes participantes, a Mary Magic e María Simón, e vémonos agora na seguinte conversa.
Thank you so much.